Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to see some familiar faces in the crowd. I'm going to share my screen, so give me 1 second. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to encourage everyone to use the chat. This is a conversation that you and I are having. I'm definitely here to give you a lot of information, and I want to make sure that you come out of today with new skills and new tools.
He has to wait himself. He has to wait a long time.
But this is really an opportunity.
Let me
tired.
I'm going to mute everyone, and then Dr. Cohen, unmute yourself, please.
As I was saying, I want to give you a lot of information. I want to give you a lot of tools and skills, but this is truly a conversation that you and I are going to be having. So use the chat. Hannah, if you don't mind just keeping an eye on the chat. If there are questions, interrupt. This is a conversation. And as I'm talking about things, try to think of where you're going to implement them. The best way to learn is really when you think of something concrete, a place where you can put this into practice immediately. So much of what we're going to talk about today is going to sound familiar. These are terms that maybe you've heard before. Some of it might be brand new. I think we're all going to need to contend with some of the discomfort that comes from doing something that is unfamiliar and not something that you're usually used to doing, and that's okay. As I've said, our goal tonight is to learn together. So we have a lot of material to cover. I'm a fast talker. Stop me if I'm going too fast. If something is unclear, let's dive right in. What I love about this saying is that it truly resonates. You know, when I'm not in my practice, I'm a guidance counselor in a high school, girls' high school. So you could imagine that I spend much of my time talking to crying students, and sometimes, I'll be honest, crying faculty. That happens too. And this idea that I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you make them feel is so true. And I think, Hannah, it really resonated with me what you said about the Rebbe, that one of the most amazing things about the Rebbe was really how he was able to make every single person feel valued, no matter where they were from. And I think that sometimes we get confused and think that teachers, especially in the elementary and high school level, went into teaching because they wanted to teach, right? It makes sense. It's sort of like all in the name, teacher. Well, a computer could teach. People go into teaching because they want to educate. They want to inspire. They want to support. They want to validate. And what we know, what we've learned over and over again, is that in the long term, and teachers, I know this is really hard to hear, but in the long term, students may not remember much of the information we gave them, but they will remember how we and the information we gave them made them feel. And so being an educator really means creating an emotional link between us, our students, and the material. So look, sometimes I say this and I see teachers' eyes a little bit kind of like glaze over, because maybe, frankly, you are the teacher who says, I just want to teach my material. I want to come into my class. I want my students to know the material, and I want them to get good grades on the test. And you know what? If that's you, that's okay. That's really okay. Because the research is very clear. Students who do well at school from a psychological perspective do better academically. We know that when we improve students' social emotional well-being, we see an improvement in their grades. So by focusing on their psychological needs, we can move a student from a C to a B and from a B to an A. There's a lot of power in this, because knowing and feeling that someone really understands you lasts a lifetime. I want us all to take 1 minute, okay, just 1 minute. Think of a teacher that really meant something to you. Almost everyone's got one. And if you didn't, I'm sorry, you should find one now. But we all have that teacher that we may not remember anything she taught, but there was just something about her that we felt seen, we felt heard, we felt understood. That's what we want. And so everything we're going to talk about today has to really start with us. You cannot teach something you don't know. So we need to practice these skills in ourselves, and we need to be able to have these conversations within our own lives before we can really move on and bring it into the classroom. And it really needs to start with creating a safe space. So what is a safe space? Well, first of all, we have to ask, what is this? What's a space? What's the space we're talking about? Well, our space is our classroom, our school building. In the past year and a half, for many of us, it was a virtual classroom. For some of us, it may still be a virtual classroom. For some, it's home. And the question we need to ask is, okay, so what is the experience that my student is having right now? Can they participate in the lesson? Do they have privacy? And certainly what we've learned from the virtual experience is that it's really not so simple. You know, I had a student this year who we were, for the most part, in person, but there were segments of time when we were virtual. And the teachers came to me and they're like so upset because she never turns on her video. We were on Zoom. She would never turn on her video. So frustrating. It's so disrespectful. How can you get on a Zoom? You don't turn on your video. And so I called her. I'm like, can we talk for a few minutes? Like, you know, teachers are telling me, I just want to make sure everything's okay. I'm wondering, note, no accusation. I'm wondering, how come you don't turn on your video? And what she said is that her parents are hoarders. Their house is a mess. She's too embarrassed to turn on her video. There's no way for the teachers to know that. All they could see is the behavior. But this is what it means to create a safe space. We need to look beyond the behavior. No, I consulted with different schools, and in some schools we found students who couldn't answer questions because the parents would berate them when they would get the wrong answer. Or they had to remain on mute because there was too much fighting going on in the background. So I think what this experience has really taught us is that students have a whole life that they exist in really outside of our safe space. And at the very least, what we want to do is that when they are in our buildings, when they are in our schools, we need to make sure that our classroom is a safe space for all of our students. And it needs to be a safe space for all of our students, including the one in the back who never raises her hand, or the one that no one wants to work with because he's so difficult. Because it's really easy to focus on our star students because they make us feel good. Who doesn't want to teach to a class that is engaged and participatory? You come out feeling like $1,000,000. They asked questions, they were in it. But we really need to the class who's not engaged. We need to teach the class who's not participatory. So you want to ask yourself, okay, so what is the environment in my classroom? And friends, it's a vibe. How does it feel when you walk into the classroom? Can people ask questions and it's safe for them to ask questions? Can kids disagree with each other and still be respected? You know, I was asked to walk into, you know, I live in New Jersey, so I was asked to walk into one of the New York schools and observe. So I'm sitting in this teacher's class. She's amazing. She's an amazing, amazing teacher. And she taught this beautiful, beautiful lesson. And then she says, are there any questions? Totally appropriate. But it was 1 minute to the bell. So immediately, the vibe in the class is, if you pick up your hand and ask a question right now, we're going to kill you. Because she'll have to answer this question, and then we're all going to have to stay late, and no one wants that. So she didn't intend for it to not be a safe environment for questions, but things like that are things that we need to be mindful of. What happens when kids disagree in class? Are we able to teach them how to have a conversation that is respectful? And I want to encourage all of us to actually teach these skills. If we really think about it, when it comes to social emotional skills, the last time we actively teach social emotional skills is in preschool, right? That's when we talk to kids about you have to share and you have to take turns and all those important things. And then we kind of figure they know, but they don't. And so before we engage in a conversation in class, I always encourage teachers, tell them how to have a conversation. Tell them how to disagree. Set up rules. In this class, when someone is speaking, we don't interrupt. In this class, we're allowed to disagree, but here is the language you use to disagree. I hear your point. I think differently. That's okay, because that's a respectful disagreement. Create a space in which everyone can be part of that conversation. And we want to establish and communicate routines. What do you expect from them? When they walk into the classroom, do they know what they're supposed to do? Not just the obvious things, but the subtle things, right? I think a lot of times we feel like kids are chutzpahdik. It's a big thing because they do things and we're like, this is so rude. How could you do it? Well, did we ever tell them not to? We assume they would know, often they don't know. And if the routine needs to change, it's okay. So we can help them prepare for that uncertainty. A couple of years ago, the MTA, the New York City subway, ran a study to evaluate people's experience of the subway. You can imagine they didn't get the highest grades. It turns out that one of the things that were very frustrating to people is that when they would stand on the platform waiting for a subway or when they're waiting for the bus, it drove them crazy because they had no idea, when is the bus coming? When is the next subway coming? So what they did is that they put up these electronic signs of how long before the next train or next bus. So you would know, you would stand there, you'd look at the sign, it would say 15 minutes to the next train. And that made a huge difference in the experience that people were having, because people can wait patiently when they know when it might end. What we can't tolerate, and this is true for all of us, what we cannot tolerate is the uncertainty. This is why this past year and a half has been so demanding, because we didn't know what was going to happen next. And so whenever we can offer our students an explanation and plan, we should. We want to use a strength-based approach. What is this child good at? That's what it means to be safe in a classroom. Someone sees what I'm good at. Now, listen, not everyone is an athlete, not everyone's an artist, not everyone's an A student, but everyone is good at something. Look for the something. And we want to provide them with opportunities for choice, right? If you're having a hard time, you have the option of either stepping outside for a few minutes and calming down or going to the principal's office. It's your choice, it's your decision. Now, often teachers will tell me, listen, this is not going to work, right? It's not going to work because we don't have the time and we don't have the capacity to teach these routines. So what I will say is that when I was in elementary school, my principal told me, when you walk up the stairs, go to the right. And she said it so many times that to this day, when I walk upstairs, I veer right without even noticing. If we teach the routine, the kids will know it, the kids will do it. Skills last a lifetime. So I want us to watch a very quick video of a teacher who, and this is for the elementary school, although you can adapt this language for the high school, a teacher who really is focusing on creating that safe language in the classroom. So here we go.
My body is so steady and calm because your bodies are so steady.
Being able to teach children how to manage their emotions is actually a very important pathway to intellectual learning, because if you can't manage your feelings, it's hard to open up your brain to be able to receive the content that you're trying to learn.
I do a lot of work around self-awareness, being able to name emotions and then make a choice around those. You have a large range of emotions during a school day working with children. Some are completely joyful and so exciting, and some are really frustrating or incredibly disheartening. When you talk when I'm talking, it feels like you're not ready to listen to me. So one of the most authentic ways for me to help them expand their own vocabulary is to use my personal experience with my own emotions in the classroom. When people start talking about other things while I'm still giving directions, it feels frustrating for me and I have to take a breath, catch myself, and say, it's okay, I'm gonna try again.
One of the critical features of learning is modeling. We learn by watching others. In this classroom, we see the teacher modeling her recognition of her emotions and also modeling how she deals with them in productive ways. And that is the first step in helping children learn to manage their own emotions.
Big breath in. Big breath out.
It's complicated, so we breathe. And that's how so when we're ever going crazy, it helps us calm down.
It's based on real life information. Can you make sure your body's sending a message that you're listening to me? Because it hurts my heart when you look the other way when I'm talking. Thanks, dude. My heart feels much better now. Naming my own emotions and modeling for the students how I can attach a emotional vocabulary word to how I'm feeling and then sort of articulate how I'm processing that is a really authentic way for them to sort of pick up that same skill set. And for them to also see that I, as their teacher, am a real human who's having real feelings during the day, but I'm also doing my best to handle them in a way that is safe and kind and productive. So they recognize that having big feelings are part of being human, but being able to name them and do something about them is really the work we're going to do together.
Any questions before we keep going about what you just saw? Feel free to unmute. Okay, no questions. No questions means either it was super clear or none of it made sense. So I'm kind of hoping for super clear.
I have a question.
Please.
I have a question actually. It's just, I'm just kind of processing. I'm sorry, my screen's off, but you can hear
No
me.
worries.
Okay.
No worries, I hear you.
Okay. So it says you have to create a safe environment first, where there's an emotional connection already between the students and the teacher. But part of that is created when you actually do what she's doing as well. So it's almost like a two-tier process there.
Yes, yes, excellent observation. It's actually a cycle, right? You create the space and that gives you an emotional connection. You have an emotional connection and that creates an even safer space. It's the chicken and the egg. And the truth is that you can really start from either, but it is absolutely a cyclical process. And it's an incredibly powerful process. We know modeling, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we know modeling is incredibly effective in terms of teaching. But modeling is really most effective, and the research is very, very clear on this, when you feel an emotional connection. When you're tied to someone, then you will learn from them. So let's talk about how we do this. This is all great, and this is all beautiful in theory. And where does it start? So it really needs to start with what we call perspective taking. What do you see? Do you see an old woman? Or do you see a young girl? And if you see only one, can you see the other? Are you able to switch between the two? They are there. If you look at the top of the picture, that little white feather is either part of the hat of the young lady or on the side of the head of the old lady. This is what we call perspective taking. If you can't see it, don't feel bad. I sit in front of those 3D pictures that you're supposed to see some picture in there, and I can never see any of it at the dentist. So don't feel bad about that. Perspective taking, what is that? Well, it's really the ability to take somebody else's perspective, right? To see the reality through somebody else's eyes. And that sounds very simple, because like, why is that a big deal? Well, it's actually incredibly complex. Here is what needs to happen in your brain in order for you to see someone else's perspective. First, you need to have what we call inhibitory control over your own thoughts and feelings. So what does that mean? It basically is very similar to talking to a toddler. You know, when you're talking to your toddler and the only thing they can focus on is how they feel and how they think. So you say to them, they say, I want ice cream. And you say, well, you haven't had dinner yet. And they say, but I want it. That toddler lives in all of our brains. And that toddler is incredibly loud. And in order to take perspective, we actually need to quiet that toddler. Just as a side point, there are only 2 times during the lifespan during which the brain undergoes a very rapid growth spurt. The first is during the toddler years, between 1 and 3. Anyone knows when the second is? Unmute and throw it in. Can you venture a guess?
Maybe the adolescent years?
You bet, that's exactly right. Adolescence. There are a lot of similarities there because their brain is also undergoing very rapid expansion. And so in order to take somebody else's perspective, you really need to quiet your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own desires, and really make room for someone else's. But that's only step 1. Step 2 is you need to have what we call cognitive flexibility, seeing the situation from different perspectives, moving between the old lady and the young woman, adapting to a new reality. Now, kids in general are much better at this than adults because they don't have very set schemas of the world. So my 3-year-old started school this year, masks were required. To him, it wasn't a big deal. It was yarmulke, check, sweatshirt, check, mask, check. He didn't have a different perspective, a different idea of what school is. School is a place where you wear a mask. Mirz Hashem will adjust to a new reality next year when he actually has a schema but it was not a difficult adjustment for him in the same way that it might have been for older children. And finally, we really need the ability to reflect, to think about someone else's thoughts and feelings, but in addition to my own. This skill is so essential that we call this a social, emotional, intellectual skill. It encompasses all of the above. Now, a lot of times I say this and people are like, oh, it's cute. It's like a good thing to be able to do. It's important for us to remember that every time you walk into a store to buy anything, it's because many people spent a lot of time trying to take your perspective and figure out what products to offer and where to place them in the store. Every large IT company is spending millions of dollars on developing algorithms designed to predict your perspective. That's how important perspective taking is. And we know from the literature that children with good perspective taking abilities perform better academically. They get higher grades. Why? Because they tend to understand what their teacher wants and expects from them. They have more friends, they're better liked, they're less aggressive, and much more likely to think through behaviors before they engage in them. And so when we walk into our classroom, it's very important for us first to demonstrate that perspective taking. And I want us all to ask ourselves, I know this is sometimes uncomfortable, but I want us to ask ourselves, am I taking other perspectives? Am I walking in and thinking, okay, so how do the kids think right now? What do the students feel right now? Because this is where we really need to create a very important paradigm shift. The way we often think is a child misbehaves in class, automatic thought, how do I make it stop? Right? They're being disruptive. How do I make it stop? And this is purposeful. They're trying to be disruptive. And the paradigm shift, and friends, if there's only one thing you remember from tonight, it should be this. The paradigm shift is instead of saying, how do I make it stop? Instead of saying, what's wrong with you? We really want to say, what is driving this behavior? What happened to you? What is going on for you that's creating this behavior for you? We want to focus on maintaining the relationship. Now, I know a lot of people feel like, okay, this is a lot of psychobabble. But you know what? One of my favorite Rashis, because I just think it's so beautiful, is when Yosef HaTzadik is in Mitzrayim and he's at the house of Potiphar, right? And he's going to sin. Pasuk is very clear. Yosef HaTzadik, he's going to sin. And Rashi there says, why didn't he sin? He managed to escape the sin. How? Rashi says, Ra Diukno Shalaviv. He saw his father's image in his mind. Now, let's take a minute and really think about this. This is Yosef. He knew how to learn. It doesn't say he remembered the halacha, that this is asur. It doesn't say that. Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi doesn't say he remembered HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He remembered Hashem. Rashi doesn't say that either. Rashi says he remembered his father. He saw an image of his father. That relationship was strong and was meaningful enough that in the moment, it allowed him to pull back. And so creating this relationship with our students, being able to see beyond their behavior, thinking about what is really driving this behavior is really essential. And look, we need to evaluate our assumptions, right? What do I know versus what do I believe? I know the student is skipping class. I had a teacher come into my office, very upset, right? She's so frustrated. The student, she wasn't wrong because I think the student skipped something like 35 classes over the span of the year. It's basically that she wasn't there, right? So 35 classes. She comes in, she's so upset. The student is so chutzpahdik. She's always skipping class. She doesn't care. She just doesn't care. So I said to her, all right, so I'm totally hearing that because it's incredibly frustrating. You work so hard on the material. You work so hard to connect with the students. You really care. And it feels like she doesn't care. But if we may take a moment to just evaluate, what do you know? And what do you believe? So what we know is that she's not showing up for class. That's a fact. That we know. What do we believe? You believe it's because she doesn't care. You don't know that. Maybe it's because of that, but maybe it isn't. And so we want to come in with a sense of curiosity and exploration. How come she's skipping class? And so what I asked her to do is to contact the student and not say, you haven't been in my class, I'm going to fail you, this is over, but rather say, I've noticed that you missed a lot of classes. I'm just wondering how come. Because the answer might be very different than what you assumed. And because maybe she needs help in order to help her see how important things are, in order to help her do the right things. And I get it. It's incredibly hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for all of us because we get triggered, right? And what immediately gets triggered for us in the moment is a self-defense mechanism. And here's why. If I define this as the student's problem, then the student is the only one who needs to change. They're rude. They don't care. They need to change. And as humans, we really don't like to change. Why would I want to do all this hard work? It should be on them. It's much easier. That really works out for me. But if I shift my perspective, if I shift my perception, and instead of saying this is on them, I say, how do I maintain this relationship? Well, a relationship is between two people. Now we both bear the burden of responsibility. We both need to change. We're in this together. And in order to do that, I think it's very important for us to shift away from the use of certain language. I know it's hard, but I'm encouraging you to, as we're talking about this, really think about this. We use things like attention seeking, right? We'll say a student is attention seeking. Friends, we're all attention seeking. Who doesn't like attention? We all love attention. Who doesn't like it when someone notices them? It's not a negative thing. It just needs to be channeled. We call students lazy sometimes or rude. We want to look beyond the terms into what is driving this behavior. And again, this is stuff that we all need. By using this language, we model to ourselves, we model to the students that people are more than just the sum of their behavior. And you can say in the class, you know, I get very frustrated when you show up late to class. I find it very disruptive. I know you're not trying to be disruptive. I wonder what makes you late. You're having a hard time getting here on time. What is standing in the way of that? Before I keep going, and we're about to get into two really essential skills that we're going to focus on today, and those are emotion regulation. I'm being very mindful of the time, and empathy. Hopefully we get to both. What is emotion regulation? Well, it's basically our ability to manage our emotions. And we all know what it looks like when we don't, because those are the times that we say, oh gosh, you really lost it, right? He really lost it. They don't have emotional regulation. What we see in kids who don't have emotional regulation are things like a lot of misbehaving, high anxiety, sadness, and uncontrolled anger. So it's actually incredibly important to know how to regulate emotion. And we need to start off by identifying the emotion, not so much in terms of what's just the right word, but in general, how does this feel? We need to do this for ourselves first. When you walk into the classroom, ask yourself, how do I feel right now? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling happy? Am I feeling tired? Am I feeling frustrated? Whatever emotion you have, you need to be aware of it. Otherwise, the first kid who's going to step out of line, they're going to get it. So check in with yourselves. Where am I at? We check in with the kids. How do you feel right now? We want to identify the physical sensation. Where in my body do I feel this? We all carry tension somewhere, in our shoulders, in our neck, shallow breathing. Where am I carrying this? Where in general do I carry my tension? And we ask the kids, where in your body do you feel this? With kids, we often see stomach aches and headaches. And we need to identify the triggers. What are the things that stress me out? Is it coming to work? Because then we should talk about that. Is it when my principal calls me because I'm like, oh gosh, what have I done? Is it when I get an email from parents and I feel like, oh, they're about to yell at me? What are my triggers? And for the child, when a student is sitting in a classroom, when do they misbehave most? Is it the beginning of class? Is it towards the end because they can't sit anymore? Is it when the kid next to them is talking because they don't get along? What are their triggers? And finally, we want to identify other people's emotions. How is everyone around me feeling? It's a zoom out. It allows me to see, hey, I'm not alone. And maybe it allows me to see, hey, I am alone and that's okay. Or I am alone and maybe I need to change. That's really important, to be able to check in with yourself. And something I like to use with kids is this chart is called a mood meter. You sort of can rank yourself from pleasant, the higher you go, to lower, and energy. And what's good about this is that it really is about colors. It does come with words, but definitely for younger kids, you create a language for them where they could say, I feel yellow, I feel red, I feel blue, I feel green. It's just a shorthand. So it's a very quick thing that you can do as a kid walks into the classroom. Hey, what color are you? Oh, I'm blue. Okay. You're feeling a little down. You're not feeling so great. Low energy, low pleasantness. Now I know where you stand. It's a 2-second thing. I have teachers who do this with every single student as soon as they walk into the class. Obviously, that's not going to be possible for everyone, depending on what size your class is, but it's something to consider. Once we've done this, now we can talk about what do we do. Now we can think about what can I do to make this better? Maybe I need to take a walk. Maybe I need to exercise. Maybe I need to take a bath. What works for you? Think about it. What works for me? What makes me calmer? We now can express the emotion appropriately. Express your frustration. Talk to the guidance counselor. Talk to someone. Talk to a friend. And finally, of course, using executive functioning. So executive functioning is those wonderful things like problem solving, decision making. These things can be difficult for many kids and frankly, many adults. And so it's helpful to practice it together, right? What could I have done differently in this case? What do I want to do differently next time? Because here's what happens when we get flooded by emotion. Our frontal lobe, which is sort of like this front area of the brain, basically shuts down when we get flooded by emotion. So we can't think. By engaging, by using executive functioning, it's kind of like turning the lights back on manually. The whole thing shuts down automatically, we turn it back on. And of course, the ultimate goal of emotional regulation and what it ultimately results in is that this allows us and our kids to really achieve a general sense of positive self-image, positive what we call self-efficacy, which is that belief that I am capable. Think the little engine that could, right? I think I can. And it gives us hope for the future. I won't feel this way forever. Emotions will pass. I will get used to it. Any questions before I keep going on emotional regulation? Okay, let me see. Okay. Yes, let's talk about being a substitute teacher because good luck, because it's rough. It's not easy to walk into a classroom that you don't know with kids that you don't know and need to do this. So much wisdom I'm not going to give you, but I will make a couple of recommendations. One, introduce yourself. Tell them just a little bit about you. We're always nicer to people that we know. So if you're a human in their eyes, that helps. Two, set your expectations. Be very explicit about them. In my classroom, and this is my classroom right now, we do A, B, and C. And when we don't, D, E, and F happen. So you want to give that to the kids. And frankly, you need to make sure that you yourself are in control of your own emotional regulation, that you are not getting activated by the kid in the back who really just likes to have fun and are having a hard time realizing that it's class time. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, but do try those two things. You'd be surprised how powerful they are. So how do we teach this? As I've said, it always has to start with us. I play this game with the students. It's called the tell me the other person's perspective, right? Tell me the story from the perspective of, and it works like this. First I say, okay, so tell me what happened. Because again, I work in a high school. So students are walking in all the time complaining, my teacher hates me. She always picks on me. I'm like, okay, tell me what happened. That is their perspective. That version of the story is their perspective. Then I ask them, okay, so now tell me the same thing from the teacher's perspective. It's hard for them, but they could do it. How do you think she felt when you said that? What do you think she thought when you said that? How did she respond? Why do you think she responded this way? And this is a game that you can play with anyone, with how did your friend feel? How did your sister feel? The more practice they have, the better off they're going to be, and the more automatic this will become for them. We want to teach our kids to be aware of their environment. Who is sitting alone at lunch? Who has no friends at recess? Because inclusivity is not just about someone who is disabled or someone who's totally different than you. It's really about someone who is exactly like you and maybe is sitting right next to you. Being nice doesn't mean you now owe them your life. I hear this a lot from girls, like, well, I don't want to always sit with her for lunch, so don't. So sit with her once a week. If everyone did once a week, she would never be sitting alone. You don't have that responsibility if it's overwhelming, but that moment of kindness is going to be meaningful in a way you can't imagine. I tell students, you could afford to be generous. If you have friends at school, if you feel good, if you're successful academically, then you can afford to be generous. And I see that I want to make sure that we get through a lot. I know we have a hard stop, but I'm going to have to share the story with you because it's such a good one and I use it all the time. So if we don't get to everything, you'll excuse me and you know how to reach me, or you will by the end of this. I often share this beautiful story with students about a very rich man who was a very good guy. He learned a lot of Torah and he did a lot of chesed and gave a lot of tzedakah. He was a huge baal tzedakah and all good. And he goes to his Rav and he says, Rebbe, with tears in his eyes, I'm so sad because the only thing I want in life, I have done so many good things. I've been so blessed. The only thing I want is my soul yearns to meet Eliyahu Hanavi. Please, Rebbe, help me. And the Rav thinks and thinks and says, okay, I know how you can do this. On Friday, pack up your wagon with all the best things in the world, food and clothing and everything that's good for Shabbos. Drive to the edge of town. There is a house there. Unload your wagon, go home. You will see Eliyahu Hanavi. Of course, the man is so excited all week long. That's what he's doing. Friday comes, he packs the wagon up the wazoo. He's ready to go. Drives to the edge of town. He unloads his cart. Amazing. Goes home. He is so excited. Friday night, he's up late learning. He's waiting. No Eliyahu Hanavi. It's okay. Shabbos is long. Shabbos morning, he's davening with the most kavanah in the world. The man, his soul is yearning. And he has a Suda, and okay, no Eliyahu Hanavi. It's okay. Shalshus, obviously, when else would this happen? So he's singing and he's excited and he's waiting, and Shabbos comes out. And no Eliyahu Hanavi. Motzei Shabbos, he rushes back to the Rav. He says, Rebbe, I don't understand. I did everything you said. Why didn't Eliyahu Hanavi come? And they hear footsteps coming, and the Rebbe motions to him to go behind the curtain. And as he's hiding there, he hears the voice of a man who says, Rebbe, you won't believe what happened. Friday afternoon, we had nothing in the house. Totally empty, nothing. My wife and I looked at each other. We didn't know what was going to happen. All of a sudden, there's a knock on the door. I open the door. A man shows up without one word, unloads a cart with the most amazing things in the world for Shabbos. Rebbe, it was Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi came and gave me all these things. And the poor man walks out, and the Rebbe motions for the wealthy man to come out, and he says to him, sometimes in life, it's more important to be Eliyahu Hanavi than to see Eliyahu Hanavi. That is the message we're sending our students. Be Eliyahu Hanavi. Be that for someone else. Don't just think of your own space. Be that for someone else. Because we make assumptions in life, right? This is either a duck or a rabbit. And again, if you can't see it, don't feel bad. It's really okay. But we make assumptions. We assume that if I were to ask you right now, how much is 1 + 1? I think with a lot of confidence, you would say 2. But if anyone who's ever chewed gum knows that if you take one piece of gum and you add it to another piece of gum, you end up with 1 piece of gum. There are a lot of ways to look at things. And we want to make sure that that's a message we send our students. And so we need to talk about empathy, because that's really the second skill. And I'm not going to show this for brevity. I'm not going to show you this video now, but it's excellent. If you search Dr. Brene Brown, empathy, you will see this video, which is an excellent description of the difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and see things from their perspective. But in order to do that, and this is the catch, in order to do that, you have to feel a little bit what it might be like to be them, what it might be like to feel sad, to feel lonely. You need to access that space within you that can relate to that. So I would say in the case of a student, I do this with faculty all the time, at this point over Zoom all over the country. When you have a student that you're having a hard time with, and I want you all pause for a minute, think of that student. Now connect to the space within you that's a little bit like them. Just a little bit, right? The student who's super anxious, who keeps raising your hand. Hold on, I didn't, can you repeat? Can you repeat? Can you repeat? Connect to that space within you that also gets anxious and needs to hear it one more time. The student who cannot sit, who's jumping up and down all over the classroom, connect to that space within you when you're in that meeting that never ends and the person just keeps going on and you're looking at the clock and it's already 9:20 and when is she going to be over? When is she going to be done? Connect to that space within you. Because empathic adults have deeper, stronger, and longer term relationships. Because who doesn't want to be with someone that really feels for you? So this is an incredibly important skill for us to teach. And empathy starts at home. We want to do this with our spouses. I know it's hard. We want to do this with our children. I know it's even harder. We ultimately want to do this with our students. A little bit easier. Distance makes it easier. But we can't do this. And the operative word when we think about empathy needs to be and, not but. You're a good student, but I see you're not paying attention. Well, now I've just diminished the fact that you're a good student. But if I say you're a good student and I see it's hard for you to pay attention, okay, now I believe both. That's incredibly powerful. And when we talk about empathy, we have to talk about positivity. And here is the magic number. This is what we've learned from the research. 3-to-1 ratio. For every criticism, you got to pull 3 positive things to say. If you don't have 3 positive things, can't criticize. This is the ratio. This is the ratio that allows for the relationship. And so obviously these things are very, very difficult. And I want us to be patient with ourselves and understand that this isn't something that we're going to have to work on, that is not going to come easily, because ultimately our goal for our students is to glow, to be able to showcase their strengths and be praised for it, and to grow, to overcome their weaknesses and strengthen themselves. I want to make sure we have about 8 minutes. I want to devote that time to questions. There's always much, much more to say, but I think I threw a lot of things at you. Sit with it, think about it. But I'm happy to take any questions right now. I see a few things on the chat. So give me a sec, I'll just quickly look.
So while people come up with your questions and formulate them on the mic and on the chat, after Dr. Cohen's portion of the session at 9:30, we'll be joined by Subsitute from the Ruderman Chabad Inclusion Initiative, who's going to present us with tools that we can actually use, that she's going to be emailing to all of us to use in our classrooms to help implement. I'm going to also be posting a feedback form, which we always do at the end of our sessions. We try to do so we can learn from you. I'll post it now in case anyone needs to leave early. Please do stay on until the end. And if there aren't any questions, Dr. Cohen, we are happy to hear from you with every moment that you have available. It's just really, really
so I'm happy to see questions. Let me throw just a couple more things at you. Obviously, these are bigger topics, but I'll throw down a cheat sheet, okay? We all have anxious students in our classroom. Here is a quick way to think about the anxious student. And I want to be very clear. The anxious student is sometimes the one that you wouldn't think is anxious because they're rude, right? They're the kid who says, like, this is so boring. Why are we even learning this? We're never going to need to know this again in life. Why are you even teaching this to us? That might be the anxious student. It's not just the student who asks 100 questions. It's also the student who asks 100 questions, but it's not just. So what do we do with the anxious student? You want to give them information. Here is what we know. When I know more, I'll give it to you. You want to validate. It's okay to worry. Everyone worries sometimes. Provide reassurance if you can. I think you guys are ready for the test. Don't make any promises. Don't say, I think you're all going to get A's, but I think you're ready for the test. And you know what? It's not the end of the world. If you're struggling, come to me. You want to remind them that they're brave, because only people who are scared and worried get to be brave. If you aren't scared, you aren't brave. And you want to model. It's okay for you to say, I was worried this morning that I wasn't going to make it here on time. But then I reminded myself that it's not the end of the world. If I'm 5 minutes late, I know you will understand. Give them tools, model for them tools so that they can just take that breath. And for the kid who raises their hand nonstop and needs to ask a million questions, that's the kid that you want to pull that paradigm shift that we talked about. Pull them to the side over class and say, I notice you've been asking a lot of questions. I'm just wondering how come. What do you think is not working for you in class? You know, I had a kid, and please, if you have questions, just interrupt. I had a classroom that I consulted on where the kid was asking a million questions, just a million. The teacher was losing it. And when we pulled the student, I sort of coached the teacher in how to speak to the student. And when the teacher pulled the student aside, it turned out the student couldn't see the board and they needed glasses. And no one had caught on to that. So they were just asking a million questions because they needed clarification on the very blurry things that they saw on the board. We need to ask these questions. Any questions? I'm happy to keep going.
And we're happy to keep listening.
All right. What do we do with the distracted child? Kids who are distracted need movement breaks. They need to stretch, to jump in place, to run around the house, to run around the school. You want to help them build tolerance. Start by helping them focus for 10 minutes and build up. Although I want to remind all of us that most adults cannot focus for more than 20 to 30 minutes at a time. So we expect kids to come into school and stay focused for 8 hours. It's a lot of time. And you want to give them opportunities for change. This is the child that you need to send to the office to pick up the photocopies. And this is the child that you need to give something to give to the other class. And this is the child that you need to like send downstairs to see what time it is. This is the child who needs to be in and out of the classroom. And finally, one more, and then I'll summarize. How do we help the socially anxious child? The first thing I would say is that it's very important to spot them, because a lot of times these are the kids that really fall through the cracks. We don't notice them because the only time that you would see them is during recess and lunchtime, during unstructured times. In the classroom, they're fine. So if you're not observing, you may not notice, that they're really alone during those times. And we want to facilitate interactions. Put them in a group that's going to work. I say this to teachers all the time. Please don't let kids choose their groups. You assign groups. What the research shows is that mean kids choose to be with mean kids. And that's not what you want. You want to divide and conquer. You want the mean kid to be in a group of really nice kids so that they don't have an outlet for that. Make the groups and put these kids with nice kids. Give them opportunities to work in pairs with someone that you think would be a good match for them. And try to figure out what is it that's not working for them. Are they really socially anxious? Are they new? Do they not have friends? Was there some sort of social tear? Is there drama going on? Because as faculty, as teachers, we have a lot of power, really a lot of power. So in summary, in the 3 minutes we have left, because I'm a big believer in ending on time, I always say to teachers, don't keep kids late. They don't like it. Nobody likes it. We don't like it. So perspective taking, the ability to see the world, to see and experience from somebody else's perspective, and to put yourself with empathy in their shoes. The ability to emotionally regulate, identify your emotion, identify other people's emotion, know your triggers, and then take the action you need in order to shift that. Use executive functioning, talk to someone. And ultimately that results in feeling good about ourselves and of our students feeling good about themselves. I've put my name, my email address. I didn't put a number because let's be honest, I don't have the opportunity to check messages. So please, if there's any way I can be helpful to you, feel free to reach out. I'm pretty good with email. And I appreciate your being here tonight. I think it's really impressive that you're taking from your own free time in order to enhance your ability to be an educator. So as a parent, I thank you. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please.
First of all, it was an amazing talk. Thank you so much. I want to know what you think about class. Do you believe that girls should sit in their desks from 8:30 to 5? Or do you think we should be flexible, allow girls to sit on the floor? I mean, we want a structured classroom where things are running smoothly, but could all our students actually sit in a desk from 8:30 to 5? And if not, what options would you give?
So I think the answer is very clearly that no, not all our students can. Some can, but there's going to be a subset of students that really cannot. And look, I definitely understand that we want to create a certain class decorum and we want the students to feel a certain seriousness. But I think we do need to give kids an alternative. So often in classrooms, what I will say is that a student can walk back and forth in the back of the classroom, or they can stand up and stretch in the back of the classroom where it's not disruptive to other students. Teachers who feel comfortable with it, and it's not everyone, and that's okay, but teachers who feel comfortable, if you're willing to have a beanbag in your class and a student can go and sit there as long as they're not being disruptive and doing the work, that's okay. You can set standards. You can say, listen, for the next 20 minutes, everyone sits. After 20 minutes, you can get up. That's okay. But I do think that sometimes we really create an injustice by asking kids who do not have the ability for neurological reasons outside of themselves. We're asking them to do things that are really impossible, and then we penalize them for not being able to do it. So I do encourage some flexibility. That does not mean that a classroom should be healthcare. Absolutely not. It does not mean that these kids are allowed to be disruptive. Also, absolutely not. But there is a way to set up a routine and a structure that is respectful, but also helpful.
Dr. Cohen, can I ask you, what do you think about the fact that sometimes there are some teachers who seem to just kind of have it in the classroom in terms of management and the ability to teach, and others don't and struggle, and those might be the ones who excel in relationship building. Yes. But in the classroom, it isn't seeming to pan out.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a very accurate observation. Look, I think we kid ourselves if we think that as a teacher, I don't walk into the classroom with my own personality and my own way of doing things, and frankly, my own challenges. And classroom management doesn't necessarily come easily to all of us. When you recognize that, what I say is, so get help. It's okay. You don't have to be good at everything, right? We also have teachers who don't excel with relationship building, and that's something we work with them on. I think if we're going to tell our students that it's okay to get things wrong, we first have to tell ourselves it's okay to get things wrong. And if we're going to tell our students it's okay to try and fail, we have to tell ourselves it's okay to try and fail. And if this hasn't worked for you, but you know a teacher that it does work for, go and ask. There's no shame in learning. You tell this to your students, you tell it to yourself. This is not something that comes naturally to you. It doesn't mean you can't get better at it. Do you have to be the best at it? Probably not. But can you be better? Yes. Everyone can be better. So take the time to learn. Don't be afraid of that. And don't be afraid of the feedback. Obviously, I always encourage, and I speak to many heads of school, I always encourage heads of school, there is a better and a worse way to give feedback, and let's go with better. But if you get that feedback, I know it's painful, I know it's hard, I know it doesn't feel good, but we learn most out of failure, much more so than out of success.
So it's what I'm hearing from you is that classroom management and relationship building are complementary skills, and one doesn't replace the other.
Yes, and they are skills. I think that's really important to emphasize. We assume we're supposed to just know it. We won't know it if we haven't been taught it. Some people have it naturally, but it's okay if you don't. This is a skill. I spent many years in school and many years in graduate school, and 50% of that time was really designed to teach us how to build relationships. It's a skill, and we all chose to go into psychology. Presumably, we already had some sort of a talent for it. They spend 50% of our time teaching us how to develop relationships. It's not a given. And if behavioral management is something that's hard for you, there are very specific things that you can do when you walk into a classroom to improve that. You just need to sit with someone who's going to tell you what step 1, step 2, step 3. That's all. You can learn.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Can I just say one thing? I was going to say, with that learning from others, the best way I would recommend is to actually observe others in their classrooms. So if you know you have a great teacher who's able to do the things that you may struggle with, go into those classes and spend some time there. Watch what they do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because then really you're learning by modeling, right? Someone is modeling it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. I love how everything that you shared was so grounded in the classroom, in the real lives and struggles of teachers and students. So we so much appreciate you being here and empowering us to really be more inclusive of all of our students and all of their needs by putting relationships first. So thank you so much, Dr. Cohen. It was wonderful having you with us again and hoping for more opportunities. Ezra Hashem. And we have here with us Mrs. Sara Ciment, who made this all possible. She's the director of our CII. And Sara spearheaded an effort to create actual usable, high quality materials that can help us implement some of these concepts. For example, the mood meter and the relationship building techniques, a lot of them play out in some of the resources that Sara is going to be sharing with you and showing you. So we're really excited that she offered to make them available after all the hard work that you put into them to educators everywhere. So let's have a look, and then you'll get them in your email after the webinar. Sara, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much. And it is a pleasure to be here. And I'm sorry I couldn't be on to listen to the whole thing, but you know how that goes. So Dr. Cohen, hopefully maybe I'll get to see the recording. Thank you, Hannah, for having me on. And I am extremely pregnant at the moment, so you might hear me out of breath. So forgive me, I'm due in about 2 weeks, Mirza Hashem, so keep that in mind as I'm talking. All right, so I'm going to try, am I a co-host? I am. I'm going to try and share my screen. Forgive me if there's any technical difficulties. And while I'm doing that, I will try to talk my way through this. So I'll do that in a second. But what we did as part of the Ruderman Chabad Inclusion Initiative, a program that we started was called Shabbat Together, which was a way of highlighting disability inclusion and mental health throughout Chabad communities around the world, Chabad houses, and recently with Chana and the Menachem Foundation through schools. And that's always been a great avenue to get some of this information out, and a new one for us. And so we appreciate the opportunity. Chana, before I continue, I just want to make sure that you can hear me and the connection is good, because I'm seeing myself slowly on the screen.
Yes, we see you perfectly. We don't yet see your screen share, but we do see you.
Okay, I haven't shared yet, so that's fine.
Okay,
and so what I wanted to let you know is that part of Shabbat Together, what we do is we share tons of resources and marketing materials and different things so that each Chabad community or Shliach community can share on one particular Shabbos that we all do around the globe together on Shabbat Together. It's usually in February. And what we do is we share information, resources, awareness, programming for and about the disability community and about people with mental health conditions. And so this year we focused on it a lot, obviously due to COVID. It came out even more so than it has in years past. But the idea was also to create resources that could be used at all different ages and different parts of the community. So we created resources for children, teenagers, young adults, campus, women, community members, and then community faith leaders. And so what I would like to share with you today is just a very small sample of our mental health games that we made, because this year, because February was sort of in the heart of the COVID pandemic, we created a packet that people could use at home because they weren't necessarily coming to shul. And so what we did was we created these mental health games that could be adapted either to be done via Zoom, or they could be done with a family inside their own homes. And so they're able to be differentiated. And so they weren't designed for the classroom. So you will have to kind of take that and be able to, and they can be easily adapted, but just so you know how and why they were created, that would be helpful as you look at it. All right, so I'm going to try and share my screen now. Let's see how we do. And again, you hear me breathing heavily. I have not run a marathon, just is the way it is. Hold on one second.
The things that we don't know when we're on Zoom. So it's always helpful to make those connections.
That is why I say it now.
Including us in your impending simcha.
My pleasure.
We see it. It's perfect.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I appreciate it, because I feel myself talking and being out of breath, and I always wonder if people are like, well, why can't she talk? Anyway, so okay, so the first thing I will start with is actually something called the Coping Skills Bingo. Let me just make sure that's our sheet. Okay, so I don't, if for those of you who know Zoom, when I share my screen, I actually can't see you. So if anything goes wrong, please just give me a shout out.
Sure.
So this is, you guys will get copies of all of these. They're all digitally downloadable, printable, etc. And I'm always open for questions if anybody has any questions, or you can send them to Chana, who can get in touch with me. All that is fine, but they're pretty self-explanatory. So the first one we made, as you can see, it says Shabbat Together at Home. As I mentioned, these were created for our at-home packet. There was a lot of things in there. This is one of them. So this is called the Coping Skills Bingo Game and Worksheet. And what we did this year was we created a bingo game that can be used either around a family table. It's perfect to be used in a classroom, and it's a really amazing opportunity to talk about positive coping skills. And as you can see on the top of the page, it mentions the goals, what we want to accomplish with this, the target audience, and really this can be used in a variety of ways. I think as young as 5 years old can benefit from something like this. If you think about either your own children or your own students, obviously the language would be adapted and the examples would be adapted, but it is certainly appropriate to talk about positive coping skills at very young ages, probably even younger than 5, with different wording. So this can be used from a very young age, and it can be adapted all the way up. The time it takes, 25 minutes or however long you want it to take. It's a bingo game. And we have notes here. I'm not going to go through them. You can read them when you get them, but they're basically notes to prepare, right? So again, reminder that these were created to be used at home or on Zoom and in person if possible. So you will use them how you choose. And the idea is that what we created is, it kind of looks like this. Let me see if I can make it a tiny bit smaller. And I can't. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll. But basically, this is one board. And I'm going to scroll down for a second. There's a bunch of them that are all different so that you can actually play a bingo game and hand them out in your classrooms. So what we did was here, it's called Bingo. It says Shabbat Together on it. And it has different positive coping skills on the actual board. And like I said, there's like 7 or a few different ones that you can use. And you can read through them. And hopefully you can see them on here. Different ideas of what you can do. So we have this differentiated, like I said, 5 years old and up. So a 5-year-old may or may not phone a friend, but you can teach them about thinking happy thoughts and talking to a trusted adult and getting a hug from a loved one. There's also, we really created this in mind with the teenagers and the younger adults. Sometimes we all know what it means that we should have positive coping skills. We all know what it means to have self-care. We've heard those buzzwords a lot, but to actually have them on a list and to see them in front of you, and even to, if someone actually takes this and hangs this up over their bed or over their desk, so they can say, oh my gosh, I'm feeling very stressed out or very overwhelmed or very emotional, I'm going to go pick one of these. And you can imagine for a 5-year-old having visuals plus the words is very useful, and you can pick which ones are meaningful to you. So this is just an opportunity. It's really a conversation starter to be able to start talking about what is a positive coping skill, what is a negative coping skill, how do you handle it when in times when you're emotionally, when you have emotions that are strong. Sometimes with younger kids, we like to use those words. And then as you start talking about teenagers, obviously this can take on a whole nother meaning, and you can ask for examples and people can really weigh in, and this can become a very meaningful conversation where people weigh in. Really, I like to do this when I get stressed out. I notice myself starting to get overwhelmed, or I notice myself starting to get very strong emotions when. Even being able to start recognizing that you start feeling those things and being okay with it, and recognizing that that's how your body needs to handle things, that's how your mind needs to handle things, is very, very important to start on the path of being able to cope positively. So this is the positive coping skills bingo. And like I said, there's lots of different boards, but they're all the same pictures. And then what you can do for the older children, or even for younger children, let me see if I can just pull it up. Give me 1 second here. Sorry, my screen is being blocked by the share thing. Hold on 1 second. Try that again. All right, here's the worksheet. So we created a worksheet that goes with that. So after you've done that activity, here's a worksheet that basically you can literally hang up over your safe space in your house. And it has on there, list 3 trusted adults to talk to with their name and their phone number. And the reason we put that in there is for everyone, again, to have something tangible, to have something that they can touch and feel and remember when you get overwhelmed, when you get emotional. I'm going to go back to my chart. Here's something that I've thought about, I've talked over when I'm calm. And here I actually have a plan in place for when I get overwhelmed, or when I get, when I feel like I need to have or employ a positive coping skill. So list 3 positive coping skills. Which of all of those things on that chart on the game, which one of them was meaningful to me? Not all of them are going to be meaningful to everyone, so it's helpful to have some ideas. List 3 things that you're grateful for. Of course, and I'm not going to go into this, but being grateful and thinking about being grateful, thinking about the things in your life actively that you are grateful for, specifically, are very helpful when it comes to trying to center yourself and being able to think outside of a negative situation you might be in. It doesn't help everyone all the time, but to at least, again, have a moment where you're calm, to think about them, put them down on this list, be able to have them in front of you when you need to, can be helpful for a lot of people. Number 4, list 3 positive affirmations to say to yourself when needed. So positive affirmations, which I'm sure many of you know, are things like you are great, you are awesome, you can look in the mirror, you can have signs over your bed, you can write them every single night. There's lots of ways to talk about affirmations, but the idea is really to cut ourselves some slack. I kind of heard Dr. Cohen, as I jumped on there at the end, talking about giving yourself, again, I don't remember all the words you used, but giving yourself the leeway and being able to have your failings and learning from them and giving yourself the opportunity to do that gracefully. So positive affirmations are when you're not feeling great, to be able to remind yourself that you still are wonderful and you still have a lot of great character traits. And right now it just might be a hard time. So there's a lot to unpack with those and a lot of great conversation starters. This is really just an opening to all of those things. So that is our coping skills bingo. Okay, I'm going to open up the next one. I'm sorry, I have to move my screen again so I can see what I have open here. All right, this is the only other one. So this one is a 9-page packet. This one you are going to get. And what this is are the mental health activity games that we have. There's about 4 of them in this packet. And it's, again, all downloadable, all adaptable for different ages. Some of them are meant to be played with different ages, like a family. And some of them are meant to be played in a specific group, and you can decide how to best use them. But here they are. I'm going to try not to go into so many details with them because you will need to kind of look through it to adapt it for the audience and for your age classes that you want to use it in. Chana, what age classrooms or what age grades are most of the teachers on here teaching?
I think mostly middle school and up.
Okay.
Is that right?
Is that right?
Looks like it.
Okay, like I said, I can't see anybody. So, okay, wonderful. So these are actually, all of them would be appropriate really for that age, and they can be tweaked accordingly without a problem. So each one of them starts with the goals, the target audience, the time it should take, and the medium. And the medium, again, was we put them into virtual or in person. So use them as you see fit. Note to facilitator, there's stuff in there about COVID, which may or may not be appropriate still for your classrooms. We work together with mental health professionals, psychologists and psychiatrists actually to help develop some of these games. That's actually who developed them. I personally did not. And one of the things that they put in were these tips for facilitators, right? So you are a facilitator. We know that you're not necessarily, some of you maybe, a mental health professional. And when we did this for Shabbat Together, it could have been parents leading this around their table, or a shliach or a rabbi or a rebbitzin leading this in their small groups. So the idea behind these is not that you need to be a mental health professional, but that you should at least know where your scope begins and ends. So if you are going to lead programs related to mental health, where you're going to open up potentially tough discussions, or discussions that could be triggering for some of the people that are in your classrooms, not knowing necessarily everybody's private lives and their experiences, from younger kids all the way up through older kids. So it's important to kind of understand a little bit about what you're doing with the recognition that it's a serious undertaking, and yet not necessarily have fear while you're going into it, to be confident, but also cognizant of the fact that you are going into possibly heavy material and possibly a heavy topic, and know kind of when to refer out or how to follow up and how to do it in a graceful way. So there's a few tips here. I'm not going to read them all. You can read them when you get them, but they are tips for facilitators, knowing that you are not mental health professionals, and that is 100% obviously okay, but more than okay, it's important to have these conversations openly and be able to know who you can turn to for support should you need it, right? If one of your students comes up with something that you were really unprepared for, who are you going to turn to before you bring this up? Who do you know that you're going to be able to go to afterwards and say, I had this experience in my classroom and I really didn't know how to handle it. So I told my student, I really want to talk to you about this. I'm going to get back to you, or I need to find other resources. So before you jump into this, it might be helpful as you review the material and decide what you want to use, that you have your own mental health professional that you can turn to for guidance and support should that need arise. So trust the process is number one. Be honest means be open, and tell your group if you don't know an answer, say that you don't know an answer. Never say something that you are going to feel like you need to fill the space or fill the time with information that doesn't really belong to you. It's not information that you know well. And it's okay and better to be able to be honest, and either share your own experience if it's appropriate, or also be able to say that you don't know and you're going to ask someone else who might be better equipped to answer that question. As you can see, number 3, you're not an expert. I kind of covered that, but again, please read this when you get it. Number 4, be prepared. So in that one, familiarize yourself with the types of challenges people in your group might have. Sometimes you have the luxury of doing that, and sometimes you don't. So again, kind of going into it with the knowledge that you are possibly opening up things that might be hard for people, but knowing that you have someone to turn to, or knowing that you can kind of keep it contained is very helpful. So kind of be aware that this is a real undertaking. It's not always just a plain fun game. Recognize your strengths. Again, I'm going to let you guys read these when you get it. I'm going to keep going. All right, so game number 1. Candy compliment go around. Child, you can adapt this really through any ages, and the time it takes 30 to 45 minutes. And the idea here is basically that you're going to have different color questions. Different color candies, and each one of those candies represents a different set of questions. So there's instructions here: distribute 10 to 15 candies to each person, have each person sort their candy by color, instruct each person not to eat the candy, and in a clockwise direction, ask someone to pick up the color candy, and it will coincide with our candy complement questions chart. I'm going to show you what that is because it is right here. And basically, you keep going around in the circle until everyone has a chance to go through each one of the colors of the candies that they have. So you can either print it out or share your screen. As I mentioned, this was either virtual or in person. I'm going to give you a chance to look at that for a second while I take a drink of water. Okay, so here you can see we differentiated at the top the different colors. Then also if you were working with different ages, right? So again, if this was at a family dinner table, it could be children will answer those list of questions when they get the orange or the red. Teenagers would answer a different one, and adults can answer a different one, which means that as you're facilitating, if you want to, you can also participate and just answer the adult questions. So it's another opportunity to open up conversations, to allow your students to understand that it is really, really okay to have strong emotions, to have fears, to have things that bother them, things that they're scared of. And not only that, that we want to create environments that is okay and healthy to have these conversations openly so that people know that they can talk about them. So these are really, some of them are a little bit more lighthearted and some of them are a little bit heavier, but a beautiful way to start opening up the conversation and make everyone recognize that these conversations are important, that their feelings are validated, and that you want to have these conversations in an open way. Next one, game number 2, cards to know you. So this is also can be differentiated for any ages. And this one, some of you may or may not want to. They were used with a deck of cards. Some people might not want to use a deck of cards, so you can adapt it to anything else you can use. I'm not going to go through this whole game, but the idea, I'm going to show you what we have printed out. That basically you take turns drawing the deck, drawing a card off the top of the deck, and here's the instructions. And you can also use an online card deck. It actually has a hyperlink if you wanted to use that. And the idea is that if you draw an even, you can see here, I'm going to point my cursor there. So it has in the instructions, if you draw an even number, you do one thing. If you draw an odd number, you do another thing. If you draw an ace, a jack, a queen. So again, if you don't want to use a regular deck of cards and you want to use Uno cards, adapt it accordingly to what your needs are. And I will just show you these quickly. Here are printable questions for cards for children, teens, and adults. So I'm going to pick the teen ones. And you will be able to have access to all of them. So as you can see, it says teens on it, so you can have them in different piles if you are playing with different people. But if you're just playing with your own grade, use this. And every time you go around, each person picks a card, and you follow the instructions depending on the card that you get, and you talk and you answer which questions are appropriate in that deck of cards. So those are the teen ones. Let's see if I can close that out. One sec. Children ones, I'm not going to go through them. but just so you can see them, here are the kids ones. What do you like about your family? What are you thinking right now? What's the grossest thing you can think of? A bunch of different fun opportunities there. And then similarly for adults, there's another set. So these are, again, different ways of opening up conversations in a fun and enjoyable way. Number 3, toss to be some kindness. This is actually using a ball. And this one is a little bit more cumbersome because it's 3 rounds where everyone gets the ball tossed to them. So the idea here, which is actually really interesting and can be very interesting in a classroom setting, is where you throw the ball and you can see there's part 1, part 2, and part 3. And the game is over when all 3 parts are finished. So in short, I don't want to read the whole thing. Again, you can read them when you get there, but it's easier and it can be done in person if that is allowed. Part 1 is words of kindness. So explain, I'll read a little bit of it. Explain that for 5 minutes, family members will take, so this is just explaining the directions. You're going to take turns tossing the ball and you're going to say something kind to someone. So if I take it and I throw it to my friend, then I toss it and I say something nice to them. That's round 1. So everyone gets a chance to say something kind to someone else. And then at the end, you can ask, how was that? How was it like to say something nice to someone else? How was it to get a kind response from someone else? So there's a lot of opportunity there to have discussions during that. And in a classroom where we don't always get those opportunities, this is a really nice interaction that can happen among students. And also, by the way, with teachers and students. Part 2 is enjoyment. So the second one is you do the same thing, you toss around the ball, but this time you say something that you would like to do with the person that you throw it to that you're not currently doing. So if you think about it with a family, imagine a child sending the ball or throwing the ball to their father or their mother and being able to say something they would like to do with their parent that they're not currently doing. That could be a very beautiful opening that you may not have come up otherwise. So that's part 2. Part 3 might be for a little older kids, or you can adapt. What 2 things do you want to change in your life? That's a little heavy question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this change? In what ways would your life be improved after these changes were made? So that obviously depends on the grade and how you structure it. But again, this is just an opportunity to have conversations and interactions. Again, I heard Dr. Cohen talking about relationship building. This could be a very beautiful way to do that and very, very hands-on. Game number 4, I think this is the last one. How am I coping? Again, this kind of talks about positive coping skills. And this is an opportunity. This is a little bit less of a game and more of a lot of conversation starters. And I'm going to show this to you without going through them. But in short, this one is really more for teenagers. It says child through adult. You can use it for all ages. Know your crowd. And there are 2 sets of custom cards that are here. You can download them. I'm going to show you what they are. They're common stress reactions, and healthy coping skills. So if you do that coping skills bingo is sort of a lighthearted version of this. But it's also an amazing way for people to recognize what they're going through. They're divided sort of by the way our body reacts to stress and to strong emotions, behaviorally, physically, emotionally, cognitively, and socially. What can it look like? And so sometimes we think we know, right? Yeah, positive coping skills, or I know how to interact, or I know what to do, and yet feeling the breakdown. And when I'm going through something, when I'm feeling very strongly emotional, and that's not a bad thing. We all have strong emotions at different times. But being able to feel that and understand, okay, my body's physically, I'm nauseous, my back hurts, or cognitively, I'm shutting down. I don't want to talk to people. There's so many different ways that our body reacts to stress and to, difficult settings, that being able to highlight them and talk about them and point to them is very, very helpful. Even just to acknowledge that is one of the beginning steps of being able to say, okay, I suddenly am aware that my blood pressure is rising, or that I'm sweating, or that I'm feeling like I'm going to cry. I need to now go and employ one of my positive coping skills, or figure out how I can go write in my journal, or just go take a walk. So just being able to talk about them and point to them can be just the beginning steps of being able to cope better. And also not to feel bad. I actually, as I'm going to open them, I had a friend who called me today, and she called me hysterically crying in the middle of the day. She went to the DMV, and then she was trying to change the title of her car, and she was literally sobbing on the phone. This is a grown adult woman. And she said, the lady, there was so much stimulation, and she said, I just feel like such a failure. I couldn't fill out the forms, and now I have to go to a different state. And she was just so overwhelmed that she said, I don't know why. I'm a capable adult. I have a job, I work, I have children, and I just feel like such a failure because I couldn't fill out these forms, and I got so overwhelmed and I ran out of the place. And so just talking through saying, being able to tell the clerk at the desk, this is very overwhelming for me. Can you please slow down? I'm feeling very, overwhelmed. Those things take practice to be able to do. In the end, she was fine, but it was interesting to hear someone really be able to express how they were feeling. All right, so these are the cards. These are some of them. So as you can see, these are the behavioral ones, and they explain what it feels like when your body goes into behavioral changes based on feeling overwhelmed or stressed or emotional. Physical, these are the physical criteria, not criteria, but these are the physical responses that people can get. And again, even something like headaches, right? You can have a teenager who's constantly having headaches and they start wanting to go get MRIs and they think they have cancer and they think they're dying and they're starting to get paranoid, but really that could just be a symptom of them feeling overwhelmed. And just the understanding that that's possible could be very helpful. Emotional, here's a lot of options. There's a lot of the details for emotional. Cognitive, again, I'm going to try and go a little slow, but you guys can look at them when you get this. Social, difficulty listening. That's an interesting one. Somebody who gets overwhelmed. Think of spouses, children, teenagers. Lack of trust. So a lot of these are really important just to be able to call out and pinpoint. Give me one more second here. Those are the common stress reactions and the healthy coping skills. Positive coping skills. So a lot of them, again, in the positive coping skills bingo, were somewhat addressed. These are obviously for an older audience, but there are more here in positive coping skills, a list of them. So in that game, again, that one is not quite a game. It's just here's the instructions on what to do. Part 1, you pick the cards. Part 2, then you pick a few different coping skill cards and you try to figure out which one matches and which one you feel most connected to. And then you can share them, you can talk about them. So again, there's instructions here and you can read through them, but those are, I find, very helpful and might take more than a one-time sitting or a one-time classroom participation, but very useful to have on hand as needed. And again, you can use these in any way you want, and you can download them and share them in any way you want. So that is what we have. 4 games here, plus the positive coping skill bingo and the worksheet that went along with that can be adapted in any way, shape, or form. So I hope that you can find these useful and at least have them in your arsenal and even do a portion of them, right? Do the ball toss game for 1 round and just say kind things to each other if you see kids aren't getting along. You can use it in lots of different ways. And I hope that you have now the means to do it. And hopefully someone that you can turn to if you have questions locally that you can ask if something does come out of these conversations that you really don't know how to handle. And that hopefully you can be in a position where you can help someone in a way that you just maybe wouldn't have known before you started these. So that is my spiel here. Any questions? Okay.
That was really, really wonderful. Thank you so much, Sara. I mean, as teachers, a lot of times we hear these ideas, and of course, everyone in this profession is in it for the right reasons and wants to implement every single thing we hear at a PT workshop. But often what's missing is the tools, and it's really special that your organization has come up with these concrete tools. And Sara actually reached out to us and said, how do we get these to teachers? So we said, well, first of all, we can email it to them, but we can also do a presentation so they know how to use them. So we hope that you enjoyed both. It was an honor partnering with you, Sara. And thanks so much, Dr. Cohen. And everyone, please fill out the survey. Let us know what you think, what you want to hear from next, from MEF, from our CII, and what you're looking for going forward. I hope that if you sign up for this webinar, you know about our upcoming Kinas Mechanchos. And if you don't, we will make sure that you know about it. It'll be another opportunity, Mirza Hashem, for teachers to get together and build our own resilience and fill our own bucket in preparation for the coming year, as well as to really gain tools to be able to better reach all of our students, which is our shared mission, right, Sara? So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Wishing you the best of success with the rest of your school year. Hope you have a chance to try these games out before the year is over, or maybe in camp, or maybe in mommy camp in between school and camp with your kids or siblings. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. Thank you, Sara. Thank you for everyone who took the time to join.